Let's talk about English in North America. From the way someone in Boston talks to the way someone from Texas talks, it's this amazing, rich tapestry of sound. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into how one single language branched out into so many different voices.
So why is that? Why are there so many different accents all packed into one continent? And what is the deal with Canadians saying Z instead of Z? Well, the answers go way deeper than just geography. They're actually tangled up in the history of how this place was settled.
Okay, let's go all the way back to the beginning. The story of American English really starts on those ships that first crossed the Atlantic, bringing settlers, and of course, their unique ways of speaking.
Now, it's really easy to think of American English as just one thing, but it's not, and it never was. You should think of it more like a giant river being fed by all these different streams. Each wave of people who came over added their own special flavor to the mix.
You can almost see the layers forming right here. First, back in the 1600s, you have the English settlers and also the enslaved West Africans brought over during the slave trade. Then you get this huge wave of people from Northern Ireland. And finally, after the American Revolution in 1776, a bunch of British loyalists packed up and moved north to Canada. Every single one of these groups left a permanent mark on the language.
So right from the get-go, two pretty different versions of English were taking root. Down in Virginia, the settlers were mostly from England's West Country, and they pronounced their R's. That's called a rhotic accent. But up in New England, the settlers came from the east of England, and they tended to drop their final R's, a non-rhotic accent. That one little difference, R or no R, would end up defining two of the biggest accent families in America. Okay, so we have these little seeds of language planted on the East Coast. How did they grow into the incredible linguistic map we see today? Well, the United States pretty much became a patchwork of dialects, and they all trace back to those first settlements. Of course, those early settlers didn't just stay put. As people started moving, they took their dialects with them, and this created this incredibly complex map of regional language differences all across the country. This is the key. As people pushed west, they generally moved in straight lines from where they started. And that's exactly why we see these horizontal bands of dialects across the country. It's why someone in, say, Ohio might sound a lot more like someone from Pennsylvania than their neighbor just a little bit south in Kentucky. And these differences aren't just in the accent, but in the actual words people use. For instance, do you say pail or bucket? That dividing line traditionally separates the North from the Midlands and the South. And what about the word greasy? Do you say it with a soft S sound or a buzzing Z sound? That little detail can tell someone a lot about where you're from. All right, let's turn to one of the most important and, frankly, historically misunderstood varieties of American English, AAVE, which stands for African American Vernacular English. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. AAV is not slang, and it's not bad English. It is a complete rule-governed dialect. It has its own complex, highly regular grammar and pronunciation systems, just like any other dialect of English in the world. The roots of AAV go back to the Pidgin and Creole languages that developed among enslaved Africans from different language backgrounds. Over hundreds of years, it evolved into the complex, systematic linguistic variety that's spoken by millions of Americans today. Getting AAVE recognized as a legitimate dialect has been a really long and often controversial road. This quote here is from the 1990s, during what was known as the Oakland Ebenox debate. A school board tried to use AVE as a bridge to help teach standard English, and it just ignited this huge national firestorm. It really brought to light some deep-seated, complicated feelings about language and race in America. All right, let's head north of the border now and explore the unique character of Canadian English. Canadian English is this really fascinating hybrid. It holds on to a lot of features from its British roots, especially from those loyalists who left during the American Revolution. But at the same time, it's obviously heavily influenced by its massive neighbor to the south, the US. And you can see that perfect blend right here. You've got the British spelling for words like color, but then there are uniquely Canadian words like bank machine instead of ATM. And, of course, the big one. The last letter of the alphabet is pronounced Z, not the American Z, and that's a direct link to its British heritage. So this all leaves us with a pretty big question. In a world of TikTok, Netflix, and just constant online chatter, are these old historic dialect lines starting to blur, or are they just changing, evolving into new ways for us to express our identity? It's a question that linguists are looking at right now.
This explainer was brought to you by the IELTS FOCUS. They're an English center that specializes in IELTS preparation. You can find them on Zalo at 0847 705973.